I'd like to have a talk in this lesson about socialization. Now, I've been working with dogs long enough to remember when the advice was socialize, socialize, socialize. And this advice came off the back of a fairly small study of dogs. And these dogs appear to have fewer behavior problems if they were taken out and about before 15 weeks of age. Now, keeping puppies at home until that age, at that point, was actually standard veterinary advice. And there was another vet that really didn't agree with this, and he did a small study to show his point of view. He published a lot of stuff on that. It got taken up, and the sort of socialization that we understand today to be normal came from that point. And the document I have from that vet here, there's a little bit that reads, "The most urgent priority is to socialize your puppy to a wide variety of people, especially children, men and strangers, before he is 12 weeks old." And that advice is, it's dated, it's fairly old now, but it is what we are still working with in 2021. So when I began training puppies, socialization meant introduce the puppy to as many strangers as possible. And there's one book that I have that I think from the late sort of 80s that recommends 100 folk in 4 weeks. And I'm not sure I know that many people, or that I would like to interact with 100 people myself in 4 weeks, because that feels like quite a lot of people. Make sure your puppy is hugged, handled and restrained by as many people as possible, especially children, and ask these strangers to touch your dog on its muzzle, its paws, its tail, its collar, and especially around its rear end. And take your pup into as many new situations as possible. Expose them to heavy traffic, public transport, busy shops, other pets, strange dogs, and the local park. And get your pup into a puppy class where they can romp off lead with other pups. And possibly in modern times, and certainly I've seen sort of towards the end of the lockdown period, that it's the daycares now where you're being advised to send your puppy without you for off-lead play with other pups. And this advice was really well intentioned by those of us giving it out, but many years of teaching classes of dogs that have come through this kind of socialization and they've been labeled reactive or aggressive has shown me why this is a misunderstood socialization protocol. It's not necessarily bad for all pups, but we need to think carefully about the individual dogs. So I feel misunderstood is the right word here. And when it doesn't work, when it doesn't go well, it can impact a dog's whole life, and in turn that affects the life of the family. One common myth is that if you don't let your young dog, or if your young dog hasn't had opportunities to play freely off lead with other dogs, then they won't be good with dogs in the future. And from my experience, this is a myth, because if your pup was raised in a healthy litter that had plenty of space to play, then they have already developed lots and lots of social canine play skills and other communication skills, and these won't be lost because your puppy comes to live with you. And the other problem is that we aren't defining that term good with other dogs fully. We're not looking fully at what it means to us. So again, just from my experience, is that when people say to me that they want their dog to be good with other dogs, what they're actually looking for is a dog that can demonstrate a range of skills, a range of social skills that have been honed by practice and maturity. And these skills don't arise by accident. They need some planning, they need some time, and they need some practice with other dogs and with other people. When we walk down the street, we rarely react on the surface to every person that we pass. However, our brains are working hard behind the scenes. Our brains are discriminating and assessing, asking questions such as, is this someone I know, someone I should move away from? Is this person a threat? Is there an opportunity here? Should I change my behavior? These are complex skills that took us time to learn, and there were mistakes and errors of judgment along the way, and our dogs need to go through a similar process. And we need to remember that dogs will never attain the same level of experience as a human adult, and they will always need some degree of management, and this is where what I call walking together training comes in. What is appropriate canine socialization? Well, I'm going to suggest that we begin with a list and that we split the list into strangers, acquaintances, family, stroke close friends. And strangers are those dogs who share communal space with our dogs, such as parks, streets, vets' waiting rooms, etc. Very often there's just a short period of contact. Often that contact is just passing by each other, and avoiding conflict is the priority. Now, depending on your dog's personality, they may want to strike up a closer short-term relationship. So, for example, what is your relationship like with strangers, with people who come under this heading? Are you the type of person that tries to initiate a conversation? Or would you prefer to avoid any contact whatsoever? So just as people have different personalities and different ways of behaving, so do our dogs. And you know, neither is better. They are both okay as long as both parties agree. Acquaintances, so that's dogs that our dog sees regularly at training class, in the park, at daycare, if they go out with a dog walker on their group dog walks, or perhaps they're out with you on group dog walks, the dog they see through the fence. So these are dogs that they see regularly, but they are not going to share a home with them. And then these family or close friends, these are dogs that live in the house already, or they come into the house to visit or stay over. These are dogs that our dogs eat beside, they sleep with, they share toys with. And the latter two categories, acquaintances, family, close friends, are where our dogs need those social skills that come from extended periods of play or contact. Yet what is happening is people are focusing their social efforts in order to avoid conflict with strangers. And it isn't the right way to resolve that issue. So you can repeat this list for people. Ask yourself, who does your dog really need to have a close relationship with? Who comes under the heading of acquaintance? They need to be tolerated. For example, the vet or the groomer. It's important your dog tolerates them because they're caregivers, but they don't need to have a really close, friendly relationship with them if they don't want one. And who just needs to be treated as no more than a tree, someone who is there but totally irrelevant to your dog. I'm just going to talk about appropriate walking. And when dogs are walked towards each other on lead at normal human walking pace, for instance along a pavement, then for the dogs, this is experienced as hostile behavior. So if the two people in the picture each had a dog, unless those dogs knew each other very, very well, this kind of greeting, this kind of facing each other, eye contact, moving towards each other at speed would make the two dogs feel extremely uncomfortable. In fact, it could even be a nightmare situation for one of the dogs. So the canine social protocol would be to stop and then politely wait for an invitation to approach. The space between the two dogs would be large enough for them to turn around and leave without conflict. So that human social protocol to keep walking, making some form of socially acceptable acknowledgement, or if appropriate, we look away, we avoid eye contact. We may feel that it isn't possible for the two of us to pass each other, therefore we might make ourselves small, stand back against the wall and let the person pass. And neither of these makes sense to the dogs. This is human behavior that we bring our dogs into. So without training, the dogs will react to the behavior of the other dog rather than your human assumptions. So you may think, well, this is my neighbor, it's fine, it's okay. But if your neighbor's going by with a dog, your dog is just looking at that dog, and that dog could be behaving in a way that is experienced by your dog as hostile, simply because the two dogs have no choice. So we inadvertently push our dogs into behaving badly by stripping them of their own inherited social safety protocols. And we have also inherited a presumption that we all have the right to touch and handle other people's dogs, and that everyone has the right to touch your dogs. And many dogs find this unasked for touch unpleasant and aversive. Yet if the dog objects to this kind of touching by a stranger, then the dog is very often labeled wrong, aggressive, and quite commonly under-socialized. But what we need to remember is that this presumption is cultural, and only certain countries make this assumption. So if your dog has come in from a country where dogs are not treated this way, or for example, they've come from a restricted background, perhaps the ex-racing greyhound, for example, or the puppy farm dog, then the genetic history for accepting human touch may not be present. And the dog has got to learn about what's appropriate and what's not, and it's your job to teach other human beings around you. And there is the other side of the coin, and that's the dog that craves touch from humans. And they've been reinforced for being friendly. And actually, they can often become the nuisance dog if that behavior is left unchecked. Our goal is to maintain politeness whilst protecting the long-term interests of our dogs. We need to teach our dogs how to respond to people and how to interact with dogs as appropriate. If this is not possible for any reason, then we will have to manage the situation on our dog's behalf for the rest of our dog's life. So if you're unsure what the appropriate response is, return to your list and see where another dog or person fits into your dog's life. And by having clarity of the different protocols for each category of dog or person and teaching these protocols to our dogs, we can avoid the conflict and long-term behavior issues that come from a well-meaning but inappropriate social agenda. So if you want to learn more about dog walking, the skills of lead handling and all the different techniques, then I'm not going to be able to cover that in this course, but it is all covered in the Walking Together course, which is available from the link in the notes below.